Welcome everybody to the Neo Umbrella Podcast. We are recording. Now I'm going to quickly explain how all of this is going to work on the channel, and then we'll get into today's topic. So if you don't care about how this works, you can just skip ahead a few seconds, maybe a minute, and I'm sure we'll be on to the topic. So you can see right here on the screen, in the bottom, we have a square of gameplay I recorded myself. It's Resident Evil 4 for this video. Every video I will have some gameplay on the screen that you can watch if you want to watch something while you're listening. I know most of you probably just have this on in the background listening, but if you are watching the screen, there's gameplay for you. Just because the gameplay is Resident Evil 4 in this instance doesn't mean that the video is going to be about Resident Evil 4. This video is going to be about Resident Evil 6. But, you know, I like Resident Evil 4, you guys know me. So, yeah, it'll just be random. You never know what you're gonna get. Just because the title says Resident Evil 6 doesn't mean you're gonna get Resident Evil 6 gameplay in the corner, or the middle. But that's not what matters most. What we're here to talk about today is what exactly happened in the Resident Evil franchise to get us from Resident Evil 1, which is, everybody knows what Resident Evil 1 is. The PS1, the first actual popular survival horror game. Right? You got the zombie dogs. It was one of the scariest games back in the day, right? I talk like I was there, but I've played it, you know? And the remake. The remake's amazing. How do we get from Resident Evil 1 to the most hated, the most hated Resident Evil game? Resident Evil 6. So, I think, and just doing my own research, right? I think what happened is, you look at the sales, right? And we have to remember, companies, especially gaming companies, they care about money. How do they get money? People buy the games. Why do we buy the games? Because they gave us a good game, right? It's a win-win. If a game's making money, it's because the people love it. You know, the customers love it. If the customers love it, the game's making money. Regardless of how it goes, it's a win-win for both sides. We look back at Resident Evil 1, and it got around 5 million copies sold, which is really good. You know, 5 million is nice, especially back then on the PS1. Not everybody was playing games. Not everybody had a gaming system, right? A lot of people didn't even have a TV in their house, right? So 5 million copies for that is insane, right? And then they topped it again with Resident Evil 2, selling around, I believe it was 6 million copies, right? And then we look at Resident Evil 3, right? And we see it did good. It got 3.5 million copies sold, right? That's not bad, but it's a dramatic difference from 1 and 2, and then only to be followed in the year 2000 by Resident Evil Code Veronica X, which gave us a whopping 2.9 million copies sold. So, looking from the company's perspective, you see it's just like a graph, you know? It's high. It got higher, and then it shot down. It just kept going down, right? Now, this is disregarding all the remakes, of course. Whenever they remade Resident Evil 1, it did very good, right? So, obviously, like, okay, we gotta switch this up. What could we do better to, you know, to make the fans happy and to get more money, you know? And so that's how we get to Resident Evil 4, where it all really started. Resident Evil 4 introduced, while still being scary, I know you all remember the regenerators, oh my gosh, that breathing noise, I'll never forget it. I still get scared every time I have to go up against them, running past them. It's scary, they're nightmare fuel, right? Resident Evil 4 introduced more action elements, such as, for example, jumping out of windows, you know, doing front flips out of windows, being able to shoot an enemy in the face, running up to them and kicking them. That's a good one, because melee, right? This was whenever games like Street Fighter, you know, were really popping off, right? So I would assume Capcom saw this, because they, you know, they were like, because they work on multiple different gaming franchises, like, they own a lot of gaming franchises, and with that comes a lot of different genres. And for most of you who don't know this, actually, Devil May Cry, which is obviously very, very, very action-packed, was a the first one was a scrapped project from Resident Evil 4. That's just a little, that has nothing to do with this at all. It's just a cool thing. I just thought it was cool when I found that out. All in all, I'm just saying that Resident Evil 4 sold 12 million copies, right? They really kicked it up a notch with the over-the-shoulder view, the melee, the action. It was like an action, what I would call an action horror game, right? It's still very scary, but it's got action in it, right? And they saw this. They saw, alright, the best they'd ever made on a Resident Evil game was 6 million copies, and they doubled that with Resident Evil 4, right? And they're like, oh, we did action. We need more action to make more money. And so Resident Evil 5 comes around. I think we can all agree Resident Evil 5 isn't that scary. Most of the game takes place during the day. And nonetheless, it sold more copies. I believe it sold around 14 million copies, right? Which is more than Resident Evil 4. And so now they just have this idea. They're just like, okay, we keep kicking up the action. It's less horror-oriented now, but it's still making money. And the people are buying it. They're loving it. So let's kick it up even more. And that's how we get to the dreaded Resident Evil 6. Now, I personally, and this is a hot take, I don't think Resident Evil 6 is a bad game. If you're gonna tell me that Resident Evil 6 isn't scary, then you're wrong. I think Resident Evil 6 is scary. But there's also a lot of action in it, and I don't think that makes it a bad game. Now, does that really kind of separate it from the Resident Evil franchise? Like, what it used to be, what it's supposed to be? Yes, I think it does. Resident Evil was always supposed to be this survival horror, scary, shit-your-pants kind of thing, right? So to see airplanes crash in and explosions here and there, and we got nukes and bombs and missiles, and it takes place, most of it takes place during the day. You got a jet ski part, you got a part where you're on a boat, like, there's just all sorts of craziness, right? A lot of people didn't like that, and I would say it depends on where you grew, like, what time period you grew up in. Okay, if you were like me, I was born in 2007, age reveal, what? So Resident Evil 4 on the PS2 is what I kind of grew up playing, right? Only to be followed by Resident Evil 5. And so I was really in the mindset, I never got to experience as a child what original Resident Evil was like. And I went back and did that later. You can look back on the channel, actually. You can see I went back and played Resident Evil 1, which I'm going to replay really soon. I had a great time. I had a blast with that. I actually finished it. And then my files got corrupted, and so I wasn't able to upload the last 2 episodes. I'm very upset about that. Something just had to go wrong, right? But yes, I think it depends on what you grew up playing. If you were born back in the 90s, you grew up playing the scary Resident Evil, right? But I like both. I like both versions. But I think what also really makes it such an unbearable game, and not from my eyes, just from other people's eyes, what I've heard people say, it's just there's so many like campaigns, right? And they all kind of collide, right? They all are a part of the same story. They all meet in one way or another, which often leaves you playing this very, like, you play the same part at least twice in each campaign, right? And that gets a little bit repetitive, especially whenever you have, what is it? They have normal, or no, what is it? I don't know what the difficulties are. Is it easy, normal, veteran, professional, no hope? You got 5 different difficulties, right? And if you're going for all these trophies, you've got to do the part where you fight Ustanok at least, 8 times. That's absurd, right? I don't like the repetitiveness. And it's almost like they tried to recreate bits and pieces from every Resident Evil game before that to kind of make this mega, like, final chapter Resident Evil game. You got Ustanok, which very obviously is supposed to be a stalker enemy, just like Nemesis from Resident Evil 3. You're bringing back Sherry and Leon, that's Resident Evil 2. You got Chris, who's been there since the beginning, right? We've got all these stories coming in. You have Jake, who is the son of Wesker, who Chris, killed. He killed his father. That's crazy, right? You got all these different storylines coming together, and as cool of an idea as it is to make this final chapter, we got Leon interacting with Chris, which you didn't see in any other game before that. Like directly anyway. In Code Veronica X, there's like an email that Leon sends. But other than that, as cool as it is, it can often leave the player feeling very, very lost, right? Like, what's happening here? There's so much to keep up with, and 4 campaigns, you got 5 campaigns, 4 campaigns, 5 difficulties. That's a lot of gameplay, right? And someone like me who I started off beating the game on normal and then went back later and beat it on professional with my buddy Cameron. But it was still repetitive. I knew, after an hour or two just sitting there, I was like, oh my gosh, I really want this platinum trophy, but I really don't want to keep playing this game. And it's not because I don't like it, it's just because it got very boring. I think there are many strengths about it, like the costumes in the mercenaries mode, the skill settings are cool, the ability to counter an enemy, I think that's awesome. I think there's a lot of cool things about it. But I can also understand why it's so widely disliked. I wouldn't say it's hated, even though it very much is hated. I prefer it's widely disliked, because you still see a lot of people playing it. It made about 13 million copies sold, that's not bad. Obviously, people were still buying it, and feeding into the Resident Evil franchise, right? But yeah, that's just my take on it. That's what I've kind of gathered, and how I feel about the whole Resident Evil 6 situation. Yeah, okay, so first podcast done. I'm not sure how this is going to perform. I'm going to keep doing these regardless because I like speaking my opinion, as dangerous as that is these days. And also, I think you guys would like to hear my opinion too. And I would love to hear your guys' opinions in the comments. How do y'all feel about Resident Evil 6? And what do you think they should have done instead of giving us more action? What could they have done better? But yeah, this is it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed. As always, if you did, hit that like button, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I don't know what the next video will be. This is my first video back. Sorry about that. I wanted it to be a banger, okay? But I'm back, and I'm uploading consistently as long as I can handle it, alright? I promise. Swear. Put it on my life. I shouldn't do that. Anyways, yeah. I'm out of here. See you guys. Thanks for watching.